I had photographs, they had a revolution. And from my view at that moment in time, they had a much more powerful thing than a group of photographs, right? And I was faced with, I'm not Nicaraguan, I'm not going to live my life in Nicaragua, what can I contribute to Nicaragua? And this is, in a way, what's unfolding is a sort of ongoing relationship through the images. And that's a rich history and to continue to think about, because I immediately felt there was a kind of obligation, almost, of repatriation of the work. And I started to see what happened to the work, which I had no relationship to. So one of the first things you saw the New York Times cover, this is the tourist poster for Nicaragua from Masaya, where the photograph was made. Kind of astounding. They were celebrating the revolution, and they wanted everyone to come and see what they'd achieved. You know, again, history. They're reclaiming their history. Or the Matchbox covers on the first anniversary of the triumph. Again, I encounter the Molotov Man. So now this is the hint. If any of you have been in the show, you know that there was a frame. This is the frame in color, larger, because of course they crop it without discussion. They just make this object, which is a matchbox. And he's on the cover, and he's celebrated as the hero, in a sense, of the revolution, or one of the heroes. I think the other thing that's interesting about the Molotov Man at that time, he was called, is that he goes on to have multiple lives. And you see that on the walls of the gallery. That was what was really fascinating to me, was to document this reappropriation of the Molotov Man and the history that unfolds. So he's on the first publication of at that time, liberation theology in Latin America was very powerful. So the church celebrates that he's wearing a cross when he throws that Molotov cocktail. Or another town, not the town where actually he comes from, a different town in Masaya, which you just saw the image of the masks, bring him into the legends of Masaya. So he becomes national, even though dislocated from his own town. Or internationally becoming kind of like the Che or Kappa's Dying Soldier. He gets reappropriated internationally for other kinds of purposes that are no longer nationally based. And then the next part of the history becomes the Contra War, which unfortunately those who live in Washington, of course not us who are here, the covert aid is beginning in the mid-'80s. $19 million was the first covert aid to subvert the Nicaraguan revolution, and the Contra-revolutionaries take hold. And so his image literally is taken, as you can see, stenciled, and organized as a popular militia in Nicaragua to fight against the Contra. The other part of the story, and again, this is really important for any image maker to really be constantly thinking about what you really control. Do you control a frame? Do you control how the frame lives in the world? Endless numbers of encounters with those questions for me. This came to me in the mail. A Xerox, obviously, there's the Molotov Man, and they're raising funds for the Contra, directly using him as the hero that they want to, obviously, overthrow. And some people would say they succeeded at. The 10-year history mark leads to this photograph, and you can barely see, I don't have the pointer, but hopefully you see the legs. So this is the exact same wall of that legend where he was painted on the wall, and in Masaya, the wall is blackened just at the time of the election in 1989-90, which was really shocking to discover, for me to discover. It was kind of, wow, the symbol is so powerful, they need to erase this history in order to, what was successful is the Sandinistas were voted out of power at that moment. And then another juncture of time, and this shifts, and I think this is where life gets a little more complicated, certainly for me to try and figure out. So this postcard was sent to me, and it says, "Yet another painter inspired by you. You must have quite the collection of Molotov cocktail-inspired art. I look forward to seeing you in March." I had no idea that this artist, Joy Garnett, was making a painting of my photograph. I got this card, and I went to the opening, and I saw essentially what looked like this painting. And the painting is 79 by 60 inches. It's oil on canvas. It's got a copyright, Joy Garnett. And in there begins a conversation. I leave a note at the gallery saying it would really be great if she had thought to talk to me and told me what her project was. But my biggest irritation was the title of this show, which was called Riot. And if anything had happened in Nicaragua, it was not a riot. We know what riots are. And the lack of respect or dignity for what it means to act in a kind of collective way that was involved here was extremely upsetting to me. So it wasn't really about copyright. This is a collaborative, it could have been a collaborative project as an artist, and instead it became a battle of copyright. Instead of being a discussion about rights, who has the right to an image, and the responsibility of representation, what kinds of issues, certainly I've been thinking about a long time. There were two different perspectives. There was a decontextualized painter who didn't care really the particulars that I had so carefully tried to contextualize and then recognize how little I can control as I try to recontextualize photographs. I mean, this was sort of the most blatant misunderstanding, right? That the idea was that anyone could have a revolution. The revolution was throwing a Pepsi bottle and this was actually animated. So this idea of having a social contract that's understood with subjects, to what extent you can protect them or the images that you make within the context of their lives or history, has been something that I've thought a lot about. And obviously, I don't think there are easy answers. I think you just have to keep thinking about it. So for the 25th anniversary, there was both Joy Garnett's project in online, firing away with multitudes of responses. And in Nicaragua, there was Pablo, again, carrying forward the symbol of the revolution at the 25th anniversary, which is when the Sandinistas are no longer in power, by the way. They're still not yet back in power, which follows this date. And finally, his own hometown, Esteli, makes a monument for him. In our film, which was called Reframing History, we go back and we look at Pablo again, back on the walls, and this was a mural project bringing back the photographs on the 25th anniversary, talking and watching if people remembered them, had comments about that time. So there's no not really interviews, but gathering interactions to the murals.